Hi there, this is Melissa McNeil. I'll be presenting to you a case study for EDL856, parental apathy. So before we break down the case, we have to figure out what the problem was. And the first thing that we need to do is figure out what exactly we already know, which honestly isn't much. So what I do know is that Mrs. Rose is a very new to her position. She just graduated college, and she doesn't have much experience in this field. There's also very little parental involvement in the school because they don't have the organizations or the activities. And it seemed, based on the case study, that they kind of like it that way. And the last thing is the principal did not support the idea of parental involvement. In fact, he preferred to do things on his own and have the parents kind of stay off, hands off for the most part. What I need to know is quite a bit. First of all, how was the principal in direct contact with the community other than phone calls and conferences? One of the things that was mentioned is that he felt he had a good pulse of the community based on just parent conferences and based on some direct contact with the community, but we don't know what those channels are. What ways did the principal attempt to acquire parental involvement in the past? So obviously it just got the sense he had some tough experiences trying to acquire involvement in the past and got burned maybe. So what were some ways that didn't work so that we can build on that? C, what is the current status of school in terms of academic scores? Studies show that parental involvement does help with scores and with student buy-in and student interest, which has that positive effect in academics. So how is the school doing so far? And what is the population of the school? The reason I want to know that is because based on the meeting that they had where only eight parents showed up, it was important for me to know, well, how many students go to that school? If it's like 300, 8's a pretty decent representation to start with, and you can build from that. If it's like 1,000 students, that might change things a little bit. Okay. So obviously the problem for me was that the principal has become complacent in obtaining parental support and preferred to keep the parents hands off. Increasing parental involvement will provide students additional support at home and will likely improve student performance. So now we get to resolve. So first thing is my proposed plan of action. So my first step is to continue with the meeting that our 8 parents showed up to. That way we can get a really good feel for what these 8 parents feel the school needs or what it lacks, and what their vision is as far as their involvement and from there on out, and what concerns they may have. And with that started parental advisory group per the principal. So just kind of slowly working them in. Secondly, meet with the principal to share the new advisory group and also determine what steps he had taken in the past to draw support. And lastly, create a newsletter just to kind of start the ball rolling with communication. That's really important that would go out, which include meeting times and worded in a way that it would actually interest parents to come, unlike the invitation that was sent off to the parents beforehand. Some of the strategies that I would recommend is survey the parents informally at events. Just talk to them, getting those build those relationships by just that face-to-face contact, such as performances or parent-teacher conferences. Create formal surveys online or letter, depending on what the technology level is. Are parents more apt to respond online, or are they more apt to respond by letter? Just so you can create a safe way to have them communicate with you. survey the staff. How would they like parents to help them out, and how would they like to see more parental involvement? And then use the data that you get from all those surveys to start building trust and rapport with parents and community. And then when you listen to their voices, they feel more of a buy-in. Create a fun community event. That way it kind of increases that community support. And provide a welcoming environment for parents. What kind of areas do parents go to most, and create a nice welcoming environment for them. So with that, let's create some student success. Resolving the issues to promote student success. Well, number one, studies show the higher the parental involvement, the higher the student success. As it stands, we don't have the school standings. One of the first tasks is to retrieve the scores for the school. So where do the students, where do they stand as far as tests goes, amongst the neighborhood, amongst the district? Create a stronger sense of community, to create higher support for teachers and students. As the principal stated, he had attempted to solicit parental support, but had failed in the past. So we need to find a way to appeal to the parents. Teachers can have more individualized time with students when parents can contribute. So if they have parents coming in and helping, either doing tasks or maybe even helping grade or testing other kids, they have more one-on-one time. So teacher input is not included in the case study. Surveys must be done for students and teachers. So the next thing is debriefing. Okay, so we need to kind of figure out what's the next step. So my thoughts: what events led the principal not wanting parental support? How many phone calls and parent conferences the principal bases pulse of the community on? Why would he even consider, I was kind of baffled at why he would even consider dismissing the meeting when 8 parents had taken the time to come in. Debrief my feelings. Honestly, I felt kind of frustrated. First of all, I didn't have a whole lot of information to go off of. But the information that I did have, I felt frustrated, just because of the principal's lack of support for parental involvement. I felt a little lost at the little amount of information I had given in regards to the demographics, the standings, and then surprised at the terrible wording on the parent invitation. So if I receive a parent invitation such as the one that was given, it would probably not beg me to come to the school. Just wording it as invitation to parents, let's talk about having parental involvement. It needs to be more of a, hey, let's get to know you. We want to know who you are and, what your feedback is. We want to draw parents in because we want to make it about them, not about parental involvement. As far as my values, I thought it was important for me to know why the principal felt so adamant about not having more parental involvement. That just threw a red flag my way, just trying to figure out what was it that caused him not to have or desire that. While Mrs. Rose was dismayed by the principal's comments, I do appreciate that she had a lot of patience to gain his support and still give him the respect because he is the leader of the school. And I would have not given a second thought to continue the meeting with those 8 parents. I felt like their time is valuable, and having those 8 bodies there that represented those students, I felt was really important. And to even consider the principal considering canceling, I thought was a bit disappointing. As far as unresolved issues, I would have liked to know, in the end, did the initial meeting even continue? Did the principal decide to cancel it, or was it something that continued? So that would be the first thing. If it was canceled, I would like to obviously have another one. What will happen once there is more parental advisories or groups or PTAs or whatnot? How will that climate change as far as teachers go? How will they adapt to the change? And what type of response parents will provide? So based on the surveys that you provided for them, what kind of information will you get? And will it help or hinder the plan of action. And as far as standards go, as a building leader, I will provide a learning environment for my students by bringing in parental support, involving parents in making decisions for curriculum, or even for major purchases. My daughter's school, actually all three of their schools, really have a parent buy-in when it comes to even big purchases or teacher supplies. Have parents bring in more parental support by using resources such as events, monthly newsletters, or other gatherings. As a building leader, I'll provide a safe environment for my students. So acquiring feedback from parents and their input, and again, respecting their voices. And then providing an environment where parents and students feel welcomed. What kind of environment are you creating for parents so they feel welcomed and important, that their voices are heard? And determine what factors are getting in the principal's way. What can you do to help his perspective so that you can create that environment for parents? As a building leader, I'll provide a community-based environment for students, so providing leadership opportunities for parents that are willing to step up, continuous parental input. Those continuous surveys really help staff and admin to shape the pulse of the community and to let their voices be heard. And then using that data acquired to make improvements on a regular basis. School's never going to be perfect, but as long as you are focused on the goal of creating that community-centered, you'll have a very successful program. So with that, thank you for your time, and hope you guys have a great spring break.